A lot of people have the misconception that lower seeded teams can't make any noise in the playoffs. And that statement is utterly and preposterously false. And this video is going to counteract that. We will be talking about major successes of teams that were, well, wild card teams or just lower seeded teams in general. Now, first, I do want to give a shout out to the 2021 Atlanta Braves. They had an 88-73 record in 2021 and yet won the World Series. So why are they only an honorable mention? The NL East in general was struggling that year, and they won the division. So they still got the number 3 seed, which back then gave them a bye in the first round. So pretty much it was just as good as the San Francisco Giants or the St. Louis Cardinals. Pretty much just as good as what those teams did, because back then division winners automatically got the bye. So because they won the division, even though they only had an 88-73 record, I only gave them an honorable mention because they weren't like a true wild card team. And this is not just going to be baseball, this is going to be basketball, football. I don't really consider hockey to be very relevant, so I'm actually not including hockey, although I will just say Panthers, Kraken, both of these wild card teams beat the top seeded teams in their division. In the Panthers case, the top team across the league. So again, you know, we'll be seeing some interesting stuff happen with that. Basketball, these lower seeded teams haven't been making too much noise recently. I will say that the E5 Atlanta Hawks managed to beat both the E4 New York Knicks and E1 Philadelphia 76ers. So they were a lower seeded team that managed to make it to the conference semifinals. The conference finals, the NBA semifinals. This year we saw the E8 Miami Heat beat the E1 Milwaukee Bucks. We also saw the W7 Los Angeles Lakers beat the W2 Memphis Grizzlies. Number 3 Sacramento Kings fell to the W6 Golden State Warriors. And just because I feel like mentioning it, E5 Knicks beat the E4 Cavaliers, though with them playing the E8 Heat, it's going to be hard to exactly say, the Knicks win, it wouldn't actually be that big of an upset in that regards. Again, I'm curious to see what happens in the series, but we're seeing that that half of the lower seeded teams were able to move on. But this video is not really to give them that much noise. It's really baseball and football where I want to focus my attention. And 2022 is a really good example of this, mainly because of the Philadelphia Phillies. The Philadelphia Phillies were a number 6 seeded team. 87-75, managed to make it into the playoffs by only 2 wins. In case you're wondering why it was 2 wins, they would have beat the Milwaukee Brewers if it came down to a tiebreaker. The Philadelphia Phillies first swept the St. Louis Cardinals in the wild card round in St. Louis at Busch Park. That's pretty impressive. Then they had to go up against the division winner Atlanta Braves, who were 101-61. And yet they stunned the Braves, beating them in 4 rounds. The other wild card team, the number 5 seeded San Diego Padres, who first beat the Mets and then absolutely stunned the Dodgers again in 4 games, then faced on the Phillies, and in this first ever possible matchup between 2 baseball wild cards, we wound up seeing the Phillies win and moving on to the World Series. But they could not overcome the 106 win Houston Astros, so they did fall to the Astros. By the way, the Astros have won the AL West every single year since 2017, with the exception of 2020, and yet they still managed to beat the Oakland Athletics, who won the title that year. Very few teams in the division have been successful because of the Astros. I know the Mariners made the playoffs this year. The Athletics won the division back in 2020 in that shortened season. But besides that, it hasn't really been much success coming out of the AL West, and I'm hoping that the Astros will miss the playoffs this year. Or at the very least, the division will go to someone like the Texas Rangers, who I think are capable of winning it at this point. Now, 2022 is a good example in the baseball playoffs of success from wildcard teams. But was there any of that success in the 2022 football season? Not really. Well, the Cowboys and Giants were able to both move on past the wild card round, although the Cowboys had a far better record than the Buccaneers, who did not even deserve to be there. They both fell in the second round, and second round, in baseball, a wild card team has to move on to the second round. That's not actually the case in football. In football, number two, it could be all division winners because they have 4 divisions. So, again, in football, it can be everyone moving on. Who's a division winner, leaving all the wild cards, and thus not the case in baseball. And that's why I don't think second round is important enough. And I'm even skeptical on the conference finals or the championship series for this reason again. Now, anyway, football's most recent big wild card success was in 2020. Although in 2021, we saw the weakest division winners move on. The number 4 Rams and Bengals faced off in a Super Bowl. Although the Rams at least had a pretty good record. But they both made it to the Super Bowl. And it was the first time that no 3 or higher seed moved on. I thought that was notable, but neither of them were actually wild cards. Though, before the Rams could take on the Bengals, they had to take on the number 6 seeded San Francisco 49ers. And the Rams managed to mount a fourth quarter comeback in order to have made it in to the Super Bowl. So we could have actually seen a 6 seed make it to the Super Bowl. That didn't happen. But 2020, we saw the number 5 seeded Tampa Bay Buccaneers make it to the Super Bowl. Beating the Washington Redskins was pretty easy. Again, they had 4 more wins. Redskins, who were actually at that point an unnamed team, they had a losing record. While the NFC East was one of the best divisions in 2022, it was one of the worst divisions in 2020. Hence, 7-9 was enough to make it in. And that's also why 3 teams could have made it in by clinching the title, yet they were 5-9, 6-9, and 6-9. Just a quick recap of how they could have made it in. All the Redskins needed was a win. But if they lost, it would go to the winner of the Giants-Cowboys game. In case you are wondering, if the Giants won and the Redskins lost, all teams would be at 6-10. Giants would win the tiebreaker. Cowboys, if they beat the Giants, would be 7-9. But because they would lose the tiebreaker to the Washington, they needed Washington to lose. And all the Redskins needed to do was win, because then they'd be 7-9 ahead of the Giants and would beat the Cowboys in a tiebreaker. And yes, we did almost see a double-digit losing record make the playoffs. That nearly happened. But they fell to the Buccaneers. Buccaneers beat the number 2 seed, who I actually forgot who that was. I think it was the Saints. And then they had to beat the number 1 seeded Packers. And then the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. No easy task, by the way. But before then, we didn't really see, too much wild card success in the NFL playoffs. Before that, 2010 was the last time a wild card made it into the Super Bowl. The Green Bay Packers at the 6th seed, and the Jets, who are the 6th seed in the AFC, nearly faced them, and we nearly saw 2 wild cards make it, but they fell to the number 2 seeded Pittsburgh Steelers in the championship game. Now, what about baseball? Well, baseball, we saw the 2019 Washington Nationals, who did not win the division that also was won by the Braves. They won the last 5 in a row. We saw them manage to move on, being the Cardinals in the wild card, and progressing their way through the National League, were able to make it past the divisional round and into the World Series when they won their first ever World Series in history. 2014, we saw 2 wild card teams face up against each other. Giants, because the Dodgers won the division, and the Royals, although I'm not actually sure who won the AL Central that year. And the San Francisco Giants won, although the Royals would be back at it 2015, but that was also the last time they made the playoffs. You might compare the Royals to the Denver Broncos in the sense that they won a championship for the 2015 series, but yet since then have never actually been able to make it back to the postseason. Now, as far as other wild card success, with the MLB only instituting their wild card rule in 2012, it really just became that there was only 1 4 seed. Wild cards in baseball is a bit weirder than any other sports. Now, as far as wild cards winning a Super Bowl, that did happen in 2007 to the New York Giants, the 5-seeded team, and taking on the Cowboys and the Packers before the undefeated Patriots was pretty hard. 2005 was the Pittsburgh Steelers, another 6-seeded team who managed to move on, but I think those are the only ones who won the Super Bowl, and I'm not sure if any of these lower-seeded teams ever lost the Super Bowl. So, just something to think about.